Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. Today is no exception. I'm delighted to introduce you all to Ozzie Brito. Ozzie is an AI productivity specialist here at Vistatec, and Ozzie's working really at the forefront of enterprise AI and transformation. So Ozzie, you're very welcome to VistaTalks.
Well, hello, Simon. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's very kind of you. Absolutely. Delighted to be working at Vistatech and crazy days. This is really exciting times with AI. Absolutely. So glad to
Well,
be
let's
here.
let's get into that a little bit, Ozzie. I've
Absolutely.
mentioned that you're an AI specialist. You're working extensively in AI with VistaTech, but your role it's all encompassing. There's a lot going on in AI now. It's the hottest topic in town. It just seems to keep growing and growing. Things keep changing and changes. Tell the audience, explain a little bit about what you role. What are you actually involved in when we talk about being an AI specialist? What are you busy doing, Ozzie?
Absolutely. It's a really down to earth kind of role, despite of the AI hype. But my role sort of sits at the intersection of AI workflows and governance. So a lot of what I do is basically moving AI from experimental phases and then think about how this actually fits into real workflows where the output needs to be consistent and trusted, because otherwise without trust then we lose that power. So I sort of tend to focus less on the models and the tools themselves and more about AI becomes something that people can rely on and be part of a workflow as well that we can trust.
Yeah, and I think that's so important what you're saying there because there is AI hype. We hear a lot about that. We
Correct.
hear a lot about AI slop. We hear a lot of people
Correct.
rushing to just do AI everything. But then you're kind of taking a more pragmatic approach, thinking about how this is actually working. And many organizations, and this is something I want to ask you about, Ozzie, because many organizations, they seem to be stuck in almost a pilot mode with AI I mean, from your perspective, what are these key barriers that are stopping people from
Mhm.
really scaling AI beyond the hype, beyond the experimentation? How do you overcome that for companies that seem to be trying lots of things, not necessarily
Mm.
seeing the outcomes from lots of things? What, from your perspective, how would you sort of approach that?
Um, to be honest, I think most companies are not necessarily stuck because the technology doesn't work. I think it's more that once you move from the demo stage, once you move beyond the demo, then you have all these practical questions come up and sort of like structure. So who owns the output, and who's going to validate this output? And what if the output is wrong? So do you have the structure in place to actually move that along? And so without answering those questions, it's really, really difficult to scale. That's just the main gap that's going to be left behind. So it ends up being more of a control and structural problem than actually a capability one, if that makes sense.
It does make sense because just coming back to your answer there, a lot of companies seem to be experimenting all the time, but I'm
Correct.
not sure they're seeing the outputs or the difference. Is are they really scaling their business? Is it adding more revenue? Is it driving more profits to the bottom line? We hear a lot about cost cutting. We hear people being laid off,
Hmm.
but I think there's a big difference. I think in what you're doing because you're helping companies move beyond the sort of experimentation, if you like, into real world
Correct.
examples. Am I right in saying that?
Correct. Yes, and just bring that clarity behind what we're trying to achieve with AI. Yeah, I think the hype is not helping because we think we can inject it everywhere, but in corporate settings is the same as adopting any other tool or any other process. There's a process behind this that decides that is a safe, secure form of actually working corporately. So that also stays within the equation. So AI is not different than any other software that's out there. We need to sort of think in that manner.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when we started talking, one of the first things you said was that, it's not so much about the tools or the LLMs, right? And
Correct.
you're also saying here that actually it's not really the technology that's slowing down the outcomes or the scalability at this moment in
Correct.
time. So that brings me on to something else I want to ask you about, which is humans. And we know we hear about humans in the loop. Everybody's talking about humans in the loop, right? And of course, it's recognized as being so important for localization, language type work that you have human experts in the loop.
Mm,
But in your experience, Ozzy, what role should human oversight play in AI systems, and how are we going to strike the right balance between
mm, yeah.
automation, quality, and control?
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously the importance of AI in localization workflows is just massively taken off, and it's often thought of as a safety net. But I think it's more of a decision. It's more of a design decision. The goal isn't really to check everything manually at the end of the day. The goal is to be very intentional about where human judgment actually is actually needed. So you're looking to end up with a system where humans focus on the high value or say risky parts of the decision making, and the rest can actually run on a more automatically manner. So the goal is to reduce the unnecessary cognitive load, and then so you avoid people um, having to review everything and just concentrate on the parts where the human judgment really matters, and that just simplifies it efficiently, really.
And I suppose, I mean, this is where your role comes in. This is where I suppose some of the Vistatec consultancy services come in, because people sometimes need to reevaluate their workflows, reevaluate how they're actually doing this type of work, and where do you apply that human, where do you automate, and how do you um, make sure that the output is quality. And that has an impact not just in regulated industries, but in all sort of content that's being produced for companies today, doesn't it, Ozzy?
Absolutely. And one key element that is important to bear in mind is that the minute an AI system generates the wrong answer or not the expected outcome, you'll lose trust of that tool almost immediately. And that missing gap, that wrong question, that hallucination just can suddenly have an impact of on some sort of investment perhaps, or part of your budget for next year, what have you. It's hypothetical, but then so close to reality that it's really important to build properly around it.
And so, like, we hear about, linguists, translators, professional people in localization who've been in the industry for some time. They
Mm.
have a lot of expertise. Do they need to retrain? Do they need to change their role? Do they need to focus on higher value tasks? What's happening in the human side of the business right now, Ozzy?
That's an interesting question, Simon. From my perspective, yeah, upskilling and learning the new technologies are definitely something that one should look into. Um, I mean, if you place yourself and say 10 years from now, 5 years from now, and you go into an interview for a new job, today, for example, the whole Office package, Microsoft, Excel, PowerPoint, no one really asks you about that in an interview. It's a given. Every every recruiter is expecting that you should know all those basic tools. I think AI will have a similar there will be a similar situation for AI maybe in 5, 10 years from now, where you won't be expected to create something, but to know that there should be an ability that you could gain to help you do your job better and more efficiently and save time, for example. So I do see that sort of angle behind it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And coming back to a company perspective, then, the real shift, I think, in AI, we see it all the time when companies move from these isolated
Mm,
experiments and it becomes more workflow, it becomes a new way of working. And that seems to be, Ozzy, where
mm.
things start to change. You must see this as well. I mean, any thoughts on how a company can progress better in this area, moving from those isolated experiments into things starting to change and company workflows?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where things begin to change. And when AI becomes part of a workflow, it's no longer something that people experiment with. It becomes part of how the work gets done. And that's when questions regarding continuity, ownership, and traceability really begin to matter. So the focus shifts from what can this model do to how does this actually work end to end? So it's a completely different question there. And so a well-designed system, a well-designed workflow reduces cognitive load because people don't have to figure how AI works every single time. It's already part of the process. So that makes it
Yeah,
simple to
yeah,
follow.
yeah, that makes sense. And you're right, that's where we see big growth changes, moving past experimentation. And of course, we have to touch on data. Uh,
Or
the data side of things is becoming. I mean, it's always been important, but it's kind of critical in this LLM world that we find ourselves in. What are your thoughts on the importance of data? I know Vistatec has a lot of data services, for example, but the considerations of data when you're trying to determine output quality seems to be quite significant.
and I think it's not spoken enough about data, how critical it is. And I mean, to be clear about it, it's not about having a lot of data, having as much data as you can have. You got two sides of the story. On one side, you've got clean data, which really, really matters. So if your data is sort of noisy and inconsistent, well, that's going to show up in the output, obviously. But beyond that as well, it's really about relevance and context. The data, what data the model sees, how he sees it, that has a huge impact on the quality as well. So a lot of the focus now is on how you structure the data and control that context rather than actually just collecting more data unnecessarily.
Yeah, it's such a wide topic, and we've seen, haven't we, lots
Mm,
of companies who are relying
mm,
just on the public data or the data that the big models were trained on. And then we're seeing other companies that are
mm,
sitting on their own data lakes of very valuable data, and
absolutely,
they're using AI with their own data that some of these companies have been working with data for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and they have a lot of data, and those
absolutely,
companies seem to be getting really good outputs because AI, if it's good at anything, Ozzy, it seems to be very good at being able to analyze that data and come up with more meaningful outputs because their data is probably treated in a better way. It's been managed better. It's got a better quality of the data. As you mentioned, it's clean data as
absolutely,
opposed to these hallucinations or maybe the public training data where there are still some big gaps, particularly in localization training data. Once you go outside of the major languages or even outside
absolutely,
of the English language, there's big gaps in data, right?
absolutely. And the whole thing that you just described there, you can put two words on that. You can call it corporate memory. And that is before it's even clean, that is the sort of like the birth of a corporate brain.
I like that.
That's
I like
that's
that.
like that is your massive translation memory that fits a corporate brain the legs of the company, that knows what finance is doing, that knows what operation is doing. So you can walk down that path with data, with AI, and a really a control system, and expose and sort of race to view all these connections between different areas of a business, for example.
I think you've stumbled on a great episode title there, Ozzy. Ozzie Bristol, AI and the birth of a corporate brain. I love that.
I've just yeah, well, that's gonna have to be you and I, guess that just came up.
That's very
Good
good.
one.
I like that a lot. Thanks for sharing that. I can't miss also the topic of prompting because I think
Hmm.
a lot of people are trying prompting. Maybe it's the first way they experience AI. They try to put a prompt together, but people were keeping prompts. They had prompt libraries. They were really working hard on how to prompt. So the large language model output was giving you what you needed. There was trial and error with prompting. Some
Right.
of the memory capabilities now is a lot better. It seems to remember better. But where
Yeah.
are we on prompting, Ozzy? Are we as focused on prompting today as we've ever been? Is it more complicated? Or are we just saying to the models, hey, I'm trying to do this. Can you tell me what prompt I should use? Where are we with prompting today?
Uh, it has it has gotten a lot better, and one of the things that you mentioned, the context window is a lot bigger, so you can literally throw a bunch of documents and just ask one single prompt question. Build this for me, blah 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 blah. And that sort of works, I think, individually. But once you start again trying to put that on a corporate level where you have documentation, there needs some sort of level of privacy as well, and also the answers need to be properly grounded on reality and on the documentation that is seen. Then the considerations start to sort of change slightly. And so I think prompting is really useful, but I think it's not the main focus anymore. I think what we're trying to see is a shift towards designing systems that manage the context around the model. So you actually manage how the information and when the information is going to be seen by the model. So what you do with that is basically the model is seeing the data at one point of time, and it's also how is it structured, and then also you can even see how prompts are generated dynamically within those workflows rather than generating one individually. So it's good to do it. The individual prompting, it's a really great exercise. It's also partly creative, but when you're looking at 1,000 records for a business and a company setting, that's not really longer. That's not sustainable. How many shots you have to actually sit behind to observe? So you begin to automate behind those systems. So that's how far prompting is going to get you, I think. So I think instead of trying to write the perfect prompt, I think it becomes more about designing the overall setup so that it produces the right outcome consistently.
Yeah, and I know you work with customers and I know you work through a lot of this setup, almost this map, this flow of how things work. And it can be quite complicated because you have to understand what you're trying to do and then you have to put it in the right order and you have to get it to check and validate. I
Mhm.
recall not too long ago you were demonstrating an example where the AI itself was doing validation checks 3 times and then also bouncing it out to humans and then coming back to automated evaluations of the outputs. And it was double checking itself 3 or 4 times based on something that you'd written. Um, and I think it's that level of detail that enables scale, Ozzy, because it's not straightforward, right?
Correct, correct. I mean, you want to be the one making the final decision, but that loop that just describes there gets rid of the answers, the output from the system. They are actually simple to get, to see, to observe. So you automate those because they no longer need a revision by a human, and you concentrate on the ones that actually borderline, and that's what the system is going to surface for you. So AI is not going to solve the problem; it's going to surface what needs to be looked at, and then we humans decide. yes, no, great, we go forward with it. And adapt if it, sorry, adapt if it's necessary as well.
So, Ozzy, as you look ahead
Mhm.
from your perspective, and as enterprise AI continues to evolve, what are the trends or the shifts that you're thinking about that you believe will define this next phase of transformation?
Mhm. I think the big shift is from tools to capability. It doesn't seem to be like a big thing, but it's simple words as well. So instead of isolated use cases, organizations will start to think about how AI fits into structural workflows with evaluation and governance built in from day one. And I think things like traceability and explainability will become much more important, especially as you scale across teams and regions, for example.
I think that's such a great point that you've made. The
Mm.
accountability and the traceability, we're seeing that becoming such a hot topic. Thanks for raising that. Now, Ozzy, I can't let you go with asking you a quick last question, right? What do you love about your role in Vistatech? Because it sounds like a very exciting place to be. And what do you like about working in the enterprise AI space?
Yeah, loving it. I'm really enjoying the role at the moment. It feels like I'm working in a place or at that point where sort of ideas meet reality. It's kind of a funny one. But the thing is that some of those some of those actually some of those ideas actually become reality. So it's really really exciting. So there's a big difference, obviously, between uh, what AI can do in theory and what actually works in practice. So having that in mind, if you can just sort of, I'm actually trying to bridge that gap, making something that is useful and reliable, and that's actually the interesting part. See what we can come up with.
Well, I'm glad we have experts like you helping us bridge that gap, Ozzy. So, look, it brings us nicely to the end of today's show with Brito. And Ozzy, uh, I want to ask people to check out all the great work that you're doing over at Vistatec. They can go to vistatec.com, check out all the AI hub, all the services there that Vistatec do. And I'm going to ask people to tune in again to see or to listen to the next Vista Talks episode, where once again, we'll have some interesting topics, just like this one, with some interesting people, just like
Mhm.
Ozzy from all around the world. But Ozzy, thanks for being on the show. Thanks for sharing some of your insights into not only your role, but some of your thoughts on where we are in this AI journey. So thank you, Ozzy.
Thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure. Really, like. Thank you.